When my grandfather pressed the revolver into my hand, it felt heavier than I expected. A dull, cold weight, steeped in history and blood. "It's time you had this," he said, his voice rough with the gravel of old regrets. "You're young, but not too young to understand danger." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I understood anything at all. To me, danger was still something abstract, something that lived in the news, in faraway cities, in stories. The revolver, battered and brushed with the patina of age, sat awkwardly on my bedside table that evening, glinting under the muted lamplight. I stared at it, then past it, out the window. That's when I noticed the moving truck across the street. Two figures, one tall and wiry, the other smaller, graceful, wrestled with a battered sofa. The woman, struggling to lift her end, let out a soft laugh that floated across the quiet suburban street like a dare. The man, presumably her husband, barked something impatiently. She flinched, barely noticeable, but I caught it. Some instincts are older than experience. Later that afternoon, while sweeping my porch, I heard footsteps. She approached with a tentative smile, carrying a tray balanced with 2 glasses of lemonade. "Hi," she said, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. "I'm Claire. We just moved in." Up close, she wasn't just beautiful, she was fragile, like a song you only catch the tail end of, lingering in your mind longer than it should. Her dress clung lightly to her, fluttering with each nervous movement that I mumbled my name and accepted the lemonade with a hand that suddenly felt too large, too clumsy. "You wouldn't happen to be handy with furniture, would you?" she asked, a playful note in her voice. Moments later, I found myself inside their half-unpacked house, carrying a heavy dresser up the stairs while Claire steadied it from below, her laughter bubbling up each time I cursed under my breath. Her husband was nowhere to be seen. The house smelled of fresh paint and something softer, vanilla, maybe. Each room we passed through seemed too empty, too quiet, as if waiting for secrets to fill them. When we finally wrestled the dresser into place, I turned to find her closer than expected. Inches, perhaps. Her hand brushed against mine as she thanked me, a touch so light it might have been accidental, if not for the way she lingered a moment too long. Claire looked up at me then, her eyes shadowed and unreadable. Something passed between us, an understanding, a warning, a spark. I couldn't tell that. I stumbled back, muttered an excuse, and fled down the stairs, the revolver's weight somehow pressing against my ribs despite being locked away at home. That night, lying awake, I realized grandfather was wrong. The weapon wasn't the revolver gathering dust by my bed that it had just moved in across the street. The days that followed blurred into a strange, electric rhythm. Claire and I crossed paths more often, each encounter stitched with something almost invisible, an undercurrent neither of us dared name. It started small. She would wave from her porch when I mowed the lawn. I would offer a smile when she struggled with groceries, sometimes jogging across the street to help. Her laughter came easily, but behind her eyes, a shadow always lurked, like a secret pressing against glass. One Saturday, as I was fixing the latch on my front gate, she appeared at the sidewalk's edge, a basket balanced on her hip. "Brought you something," she said, holding out a plate covered in foil. Her fingers brushed mine when I took it. Even through the thin layer of metal, her touch burned. Inside, we stood awkwardly in my kitchen. I peeled back the foil to reveal homemade cookies, misshapen but golden and warm. She watched me, a nervous energy radiating off her. "They're not perfect," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "But I figured, neighbors should be neighborly." I smiled, the moment stretching too long. Claire's gaze dropped to the floor, then flicked back up, guarded now. Before I could say anything, a horn blared outside. Claire flinched, the basket slipping from her hip onto the counter with a thud. "I should go," she said quickly, backing toward the door. "He gets impatient." The words hung between us, heavier than any thundercloud. I didn't ask who he was. I didn't have to. Later that evening, I watched from my window as her husband stomped up their front steps, slamming the door so hard the windows shuddered. Claire followed a few paces behind, head down, small as a whispered apology. The revolver still rested on my nightstand, gathering dust, silent but ever-present. I couldn't explain why, but each glance at it tightened the knot in my stomach. Claire wasn't just lonely. She was trapped, and I was standing too close to a fire I didn't know how to contain. Days passed, each interaction growing more loaded. A lingering touch when I handed her a wrench she borrowed. A smile that held too much meaning. A laugh that dissolved into silence just a second too soon. Whatever we were tiptoeing around wasn't sustainable. Tension this sharp could only snap, or ignite. One afternoon, as I locked up my toolshed, Claire crossed the street without her usual cautious glance over her shoulder. Her expression was tight, determined. "Can we talk?" she asked, voice low but steady that I hesitated, heart hammering a warning against my ribs. Still, I stepped aside, letting her into my world, knowing some doors, once opened, could never fully close. The sun dipped behind the houses, casting everything in a shadow that felt almost prophetic. Something was coming, and neither of us was ready for it. The storm rolled in without warning, a low, angry rumble that shook the windows and soaked the streets. I stood by the window, watching sheets of rain swallow the neighborhood, when a frantic knocking jolted me from my trance. Claire stood on my porch, drenched, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her white blouse clung to her skin, translucent under the weight of the downpour. I didn't know where else to go," she stammered, her voice trembling from more than just the cold. Without thinking, I pulled her inside, slamming the door against the howling wind. The lights flickered once, twice, then surrendered, plunging the house into darkness. Only the occasional flash of lightning illuminated her silhouette, fragile and shivering. That I fetched a towel, pressing it into her hands. She took it, fingers brushing mine, neither of us pulling away. "We fought," she whispered, voice cracking. "He said things, terrible things." I guided her to the couch, lit a few candles scattered around the living room. Soft pools of amber light pushed back the dark, revealing the glint of tears on her cheeks. She sat stiffly at first, hands twisted in her lap. I watched her, every muscle tight with restraint. She looked so small, so breakable. I wanted to fix it, to fix her, even though some part of me knew better. When she finally spoke again, it was a whisper barely meant for hearing. "I'm so tired of pretending everything's fine." The dam between us broke. She reached for me first, a tentative touch at my wrist, a silent question I answered without hesitation. I pulled her into my arms, felt her heart hammering against my chest. Her lips found mine, desperate, searching, and I kissed her back, losing myself in the storm outside and the storm between us. Clothes fell away, forgotten. The world narrowed to skin against skin, gasps swallowed by candlelight, promises we never spoke but couldn't help making. That it wasn't gentle. It wasn't perfect. It was raw, messy, and real in a way that terrified me. Even as I clung tighter, somewhere in the background, a phone vibrated against the hardwood floor, ignored. Another call from the life we were pretending didn't exist. Afterward, we lay tangled on the couch, the storm still raging outside, matching the chaos inside my chest. Claire's head rested against my shoulder, her breathing slow but uneven. That I stared at the ceiling, feeling the heavy thud of my heart against my ribs, the residual heat of her touch, and the cold edge of guilt curling its fingers around my throat. Across the room, in the dim candlelight, the revolver sat on the mantel, a silent witness to everything we had done. For the first time, I understood the true weight of the weapon my grandfather had given me, and it had nothing to do with bullets. Morning came too soon, dragging pale light across the wreckage we had created. Claire was already up, pulling on her clothes with quick, practiced movements. She avoided my gaze, as if locking eyes would make everything real. "I shouldn't have come," she said, voice hoarse, almost broken. That I sat up, the blanket pooling around my waist, feeling exposed in every way. "Claire, wait," she shook her head sharply. "This can't happen again." Her hands trembled as she tied her jacket around her. I have to fix what's left, before there's nothing left to fix. The door clicked softly behind her, leaving a vacuum in her place that I sank back onto the couch, the storm gone but its devastation unmistakable. Outside, the world moved on, birds sang, cars passed. But inside me, everything was cracked and shifting. The revolver still sat on the mantel, glinting dully in the morning light. It hadn't moved, hadn't judged. But somehow, I felt its gaze more acutely than any pair of human eyes. Later that week, whispers began to creep through the neighborhood. Sightings. Suspicions. I could feel them sticking to my skin like smoke. Claire no longer lingered outside. Her windows stayed shuttered. Her husband's truck parked in the driveway earlier and earlier. Grandfather found me out back one evening, mindlessly chopping firewood that didn't need chopping. He watched in silence for a long while, the cigarette between his fingers glowing like a slow-burning fuse. "There's the fight you choose," he said finally, "and then there's the one you drag home without realizing it." I drove the axe into the stump and left it there, too tired to argue with wisdom that hurt more because it was true. Nights stretched into weeks. I saw Claire once from a distance, carrying groceries inside, her movements stiff, deliberate. Our eyes met across the street for a fleeting second. She looked away first. The space between our houses, once so thin and charged, now yawned wide and impassable that I spent hours cleaning the revolver, disassembling and reassembling it until I could do it blind. There was comfort in its simplicity: trigger, hammer, barrel. No lies. No pretending. One night, I sat on the porch with the weapon cradled in my hands, the air heavy with unsaid things that I finally understood what my grandfather had tried to teach me. The weapon was never meant for enemies outside the gate. It was for the battles inside, the ones you fight when you think no one's watching. Claire had been a lesson I hadn't been ready to learn: that I wasn't too young for the weapon, that I was too young to survive it, and some mistakes, once made, stay loaded forever.